following program is made possible in part by grants from public television stations and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Good evening. Some 3,000 Democratic delegates open their national convention here in New York tonight.
This program is made possible in part by grants from public television stations.
Well, these are better than most that I've seen. The tomatoes in general have been so disappointing that I've gotten to the point where I just walk by them. I don't buy them anymore. But they're not the kind of tomatoes we used to get years ago.
Good evening. Most of this week, we're all going to be preoccupied with the energy crisis.
Funding for this program has been provided by this station and more than 260 other public television stations nationwide.
Turmoil in Central America. First there was Nicaragua, then El Salvador, now comes Guatemala. Good evening. A UN debate was dramatically interrupted Friday afternoon with the emergency announcement that 5,000 Indians in a Guatemalan village were about to be murdered by government troops.
Good evening. The election, of course, dominates the day's news. First returns give President Reagan promise of a landslide victory tonight. The stock market closed at its highest point since last January. Jim?
After we summarize the news of this election day, we're going to focus on summarizing the meaning of this election day through the varied perspectives of John Kenneth Galbraith, Norman Podhoretz, John Ehrlichman, and Eleanor Holmes Norton. Also, two people from the Arkansas and Kansas grassroots of the campaign give us their impressions of what has been going on. And we have a report from California on Howard Jarvis and his latest proposition.
The MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour is funded by this station and other public television stations.
America voted today, and returns in at this hour appear to confirm the pre-election polls.
Good evening. In the news this Monday, a deal was struck to end the latest Phillips Petroleum takeover bid, and a major earthquake in Chile killed 124 persons, injured 2,000, and left thousands more homeless. Robert MacNeil is away tonight. Charlene Hunter-Gault is in New York. Charlene?
We'll open tonight with our news summary, then three focus segments and an update. The first is a debate over President Reagan's claim that Nicaraguan Contras are the equivalent of America's founding fathers. Then, in an update, we look at the fireworks ignited in Congress today by a Republican effort to seat a member whose victory over a Democratic opponent is still in dispute.
The MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour is funded by this station and other public television stations.
President Reagan today went again into a federal budget cut lion's den. Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington.
And I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After the news summary tonight, we have a newsmaker interview with President Clinton's new White House counsel, Abner Mikva. And Washington essayist Phyllis Thoreau looks at homeschooling.
Major funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
Haitian military leader Raul Cedras began a new life in Panama today.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, full coverage of the jury decision to execute convicted Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh, and some goodbye words about and from Charlene Hunter Gault. It all follows our summary of the news this Friday.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
Timothy McVeigh was sentenced to death today for the Oklahoma City bombing.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, a Terrence Smith look at the process and the results of newspaper endorsements in the presidential race, and an Elizabeth Farnsworth conversation with Poet Laureate Stanley Kunitz. It all follows a summary of the news this Thursday.
This program was also made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to PBS stations from viewers like you. Thank you.
Governor Bush challenged Vice President Gore today on his leadership and honesty. Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Monday, and a look at the violent rioting in France. A newsmaker interview with Marine General Peter Pace, the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. An election eve report on the hot, close race for governor of Virginia, and the story of the Mail and the Patriot Act.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
French leaders struggled today to halt widespread rioting. Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Wednesday, then the state of the National Guard as the president sends them to help secure the U.S.-Mexico border. And a Roger Rosenblatt essay on dreaming impossible dreams on television and in real life.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Senate conservatives pushed today to make the immigration bill tougher. Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer, and I have returned and recovered, and I'll have a few words about that at the end of the program tonight. Meanwhile, on the NewsHour, the news of this Thursday. Then, today's Supreme Court decision to lift the ban on handguns in Washington, D.C., Marcia Coyle of the National Law Journal explains, to law enforcement experts react. Plus, reaction to developments today in the U.S. attitude toward North Korea's nuclear program.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
A sharply divided U.S. Supreme Court today issued a landmark decision on gun rights.
Waves of violence rippled across Egypt today. Hundreds are dead and the toll is still rising in the wake of a government crackdown on protests by supporters of the former president. Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff.
And I'm Jeffrey Brown. On the NewsHour tonight, a state of emergency has been declared, plunging Egypt under a virtual martial law. We get the latest from Cairo and explore how the 6-week standoff devolved to bloodshed. And remembering a stalwart of American political journalism, we look back at the career of the longtime reporter, columnist, and TV commentator Jack Germond.
That's all ahead on tonight's NewsHour. Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, parsing the president. We break down Mr. Trump's latest statements in a barrage of interviews and tweets, and how one county in California is cutting the high costs of asthma with a home care program focused on keeping kids healthy and out of the ER. All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by... This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
President Trump and Russia's President Vladimir Putin have been on the phone again.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, a wave of deadly tornadoes leaves a path of destruction across much of the country as forecasters predict an above-average number of hurricanes this season.
Global outcry after 45 people are killed in an Israeli airstrike on a tent camp in Rafah.
And on this Memorial Day, how advancements in DNA technology are helping identify the more than 80,000 U.S. service personnel still missing in action.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by... This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Tonight we're tracking two major stories. Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, in his first meeting with European allies, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth charts major American policy shifts on Ukraine.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement.
Lawmakers spotlight the so-called war on waste as Elon Musk's influence in the White House grows.
And the Trump administration guts key research efforts within the Education Department, an agency the president has pledged to eliminate altogether.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by... This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. In a major shift of U.S. foreign policy, President Trump announced today that he and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed to immediately start talks to end the war in Ukraine.